We do know who the regime is in Syria. It is a despotic regime. It is a hereditary regime. The son has succeeded the father, and despite promises early on of potential reforms, the son has proven to be, let's say, a copy of the father in terms of being repressive, in terms of creating a system that cares about the survival of the regime and not about the Syrian citizen. However, we do not know who the opposition is. The short reason for that is that the regime has ensured that no viable organized opposition exists. And therefore, when we see a decay of social order, when we see protests, we are at a loss of identifying who's exactly leading. However, we know the ingredients of which the opposition is made. And those ingredients do include Islamist and even radical Islamist components, but they definitely do not seem to be in the lead. Actually, they were caught off guard and they seem to be playing catch-up. We also know that part of the opposition consists of defectors from the army. The army has been used in the repression, and the army has effectively been subjected to a lot of pressure because many of the people, many of the soldiers have indicated that they were given orders to shoot on civilians and they were not at all comfortable with that. So we have a lot of defection too, and these are responsible for quite a bit of the violence that we see because we have clashes between them and the army, and we have the army chasing them, etc. So the opposition is not really united internally. However, there has been efforts outside of Syria of trying to create some sort of a structure for the opposition. This is what the Syrian National Council is about. But it has to be said that the extent of the authority and the extent of the influence of this council on the events on the ground remains undetermined, remains unconfirmed, if you'd like. So what we have here is an opposition that is clearly wide in terms of its appeal, but not really structured and not really organized up to the point of being able to win against the regime that is despotic and that has the force to repress it. In terms of Western involvement, I have to say that from a values point of view, Syria is equal to Libya, along the lines that we have in both cases despotic regimes using excessive force, committing crimes against humanity in order to survive, to stay in power. However, the conditions on the ground in Syria are far murkier than they were in Libya, and the interests, and this is again, I mean, any action has to balance values and interests, and the interests are not equal to the ones that we had in Libya. In other words, the chances of a Western action succeeding in Syria are not that high, while the price to pay in terms of both Russia and China refusing to grant, for that matter, the international authorization for such an action in the context of the Security Council, it will not happen, and therefore we cannot count on that. And I do not think the Syrian opposition is counting on that. I don't think that the people on the ground who are protesting every day are counting on that. What they're counting on is the collapse of the regime from within. Well, I do believe that the regime has reached the point of no return. Both internally, it has used all the cards that it could use in order to repress the opposition, and it has been unable to keep people at home. People are outside protesting on a daily basis, dying on a daily basis, so the regime has no more cards to use. And in terms of international legitimacy, it has lost it long ago. The regime succeeds today in remaining because it still has some assets, but as a result of the sanctions imposed on it, these assets are likely to get depleted, and once they do, we can see more defections at higher levels in the regime, and ultimately the regime is bound to fail.